The year is 1589, and Anne of Denmark sets out by ship across the North Sea. She is betrothed to the new King of Scotland, James II. No one could have foreseen how this event would change Scotland or Europe. Anne's ship nearly capsizes due to a bad storm and has to return to Scandinavia. These weather events happen, and Anne was lucky to survive it. But it was this event, this first event, that would ignite all of Scotland into the grips of mass hysteria. This is the story of the witches. This is the story of Giellis Duncan.
They say I'm a witch. Are you? Hardly.
9 miles east of Edinburgh lies the small town of Trinity. Like most of Scotland, the town was abuzz with wild stories of the new king's young bride being attacked by witches.
Do you know what's going to happen in Scotland? Rising Culloden. The end of the Highland culture.
Some were even saying that the new king was attacked by Satan himself when he had crossed the sea to retrieve his new bride. It was amid these wild rumors that Giellis Duncan would go to work for Davidseaton, the deputy bailiff of Trinity, as his housemaid. There are no pictures of Giellis. This is far before the time of cameras, and no one ever drew her likeness, though it is believed that she was very young when she went into Mr. Seaton's employment and moved into his home, maybe 15 years old. So the pictures that I am using to give you an image of Giellis are not really Giellis. Just a young Scottish girl I found from the internet. She was a well-liked girl, especially by the midwives of the area, as Giellis had taken a liking to the healing arts and was learning from them. An attractive young woman, most likely, who would have participated in the wild rumors about the evil witches that had tried to take the life of King James and his young bride, Anne of Denmark. Davidseaton, on the other hand, was not a well-liked man at all. Considered to be a religious extremist, David spent his free time hunting witches, and he was doing it long before any of these new rumors surfaced. He was a lonely man, and it is believed that he developed an attraction for his new housemaid, an attraction he suffered in silence. Shortly after King James finally returned to Scotland with his new bride, everything would change. Everything would change. The news of witches being executed in Denmark for trying to kill the king had spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it, thinking about it, including Davidseaton. For months he had watched his young housemaid from afar. He knew that his feelings for her were wrong and sinful and dirty. It was like the girl had put him under some kind of a spell. In watching her so closely, he would observe her helping the other townsfolk with the things she was learning from the midwives, helping them get over illness and healing quickly. Everyone in Trinity loved Giellis. And then Giellis began to sneak out in the middle of the night, and she would be gone for hours. Davidseaton knew this, and his suspicions began to become confirmed to him. You know, no one really knows why she began to sneak out, but assumptions have been made. Davidseaton began to assume that his new housemaid was sneaking out to meet her coven. Davidseaton was now quite convinced that Giellis was a witch. Most likely, though, Giellis had merely taken a lover, sneaking out to hide the relationship because the Catholic rule of Scotland forbid it. But these things happened back then, as they still do now. I wonder if Giellis could have known how much danger she was in. Would it be possible to guess the mad fire that was about to be ignited in Scotland? Davidseaton was waiting for her one day with his son. When Giellis entered the house that day, the doors would be locked, and Scotland would be forever scarred.
Where have you been?
I was tending to the garden, sir.
Lie to me!
With the doors locked, David confronts her, a big man glaring down upon her with blazing hostility. "Are you a witch?" he would ask her. Imagine the panic that Giellis must be feeling at this moment. The terror as that accusation sinks in. For months, everyone has been talking about witches. Now here she is, being accused of it herself. When she doesn't respond, he would ask her again, "Are you a witch?"
Is that a witch?
No, sir. Please, sir, no.
Finally, Giellis finds her voice and she denies it with every bit of incredulity she must be feeling in that moment. Every bit of fear and horror she must be feeling in that moment. But Davidseaton is prepared for her denials. Now, the torture begins. They force her into a chair and apply the pillywinks to one of her hands. A device, like a clamp, that when screwed from the top applies more and more pressure to the hand until it is ultimately crushed. For hours they torture young Giellis with the pillywinks. Her screams of agony must have been so loud, but were laced with her denials of being a witch. Davidseaton, looking down at the little girl in his charge, crying and sobbing, her hand mutilated, crushed to a pulp. He is unmoved. They tie her up for her next torture, a process called wrenching. Using thick rope, they loop it around her head over and over again, each holding it tight on either end. Both men begin to pull, crushing the bones in her face and skull. Her screams will be worse than before, but still Giellis would not admit to being a witch. For hours they have tortured young Giellis. She no longer looks like the housemaid David had lusted after the past few months. She's broken, mutilated, the bones in her face and skull crushed, the flesh ripped, her hand pulp. Still, Davidseaton takes no pity on her. They stand her. They disrobe her violently, removing every stitch of clothing. David examines every inch of her body, and he finds what he is looking for: the devil's mark upon her neck.
I bear the mark of the devil.
It is widely believed the mark was left by her lover, or even maybe a birthmark. But whatever the mark was, the mind of Giellis Duncan snapped, and she broke. She admitted to using witchcraft and being seduced by the devil. And of course, she admits to helping the witches that had tried to murder the king, the thing everyone had been speaking of for so long. And she began to name the women that had been teaching her, the midwives that were her friends, having her confession and these new names. Davidseaton takes her to Edinburgh, where she is thrown into a cell and left to rot for over a year. Do you think she knew, in the remaining time she had alive, the wildfire her confession had ignited in Scotland? Could her broken mind conceive that each name she had given to David would face the same or even worse torture? That they too would give names? She lay in that cell for over a year, broken, bones brutally crushed, wasting away with whatever might be left of her sanity, until one day, finally, she would be taken out of her cell, and she would be led to her death with several other women, some of whom she had named herself. It is unknown whether or not she was granted the mercy that some received, asphyxiation before burning. But she did burn. The fires were set, the flames rose, and Giellis Duncan was taken from this world. Who weeps for Giellis Duncan and the injustice done to her? Who weeps for an innocent young girl taken before her time, accused and killed for an impossible crime? The raging atheist weeps for her. The raging atheist remembers.